Hi, let's talk about Daniel Snaith, an Indietronica electronic artist born out of Canada that moved to Greater London, debuting in 2001 with the album Start Breaking My Heart, and in 2003 his sophomore album was released, Up in Flames, and everything was going good from there until he got a word from the dictators that threatened to sue him, so he had to change the name. And so he did, changed it to Caribou, released his debut album under the Caribou name in 2005, The Milk of Human Kindness, a krautrock-inspired psych-pop album. 2007's Andorra is his more well-received album amongst fans and critics alike. 2010's Swim saw him go further away from the sounds of psychedelic pop and more electronic. I would like to think Our Love is an extension of what Swim had, although it isn't one of his stronger albums, nevertheless a fine album, but it is weaker in my opinion. 6 years later we have Suddenly, although this wasn't his first project within 6 years. He released an album under the Daphne name in 2017 and an EP in 2019 titled Sizzling. Now don't get it twisted, the Daphne name is only reserved for house tunes and new disco sounds. Tech house as well, so he isn't really just going from musical side project to musical side project making the same stuff. I was excited going into this project because most of the singles leading up to it were really good, like the song Never Come Back. I gotta say the song is a tune and a half, has these very jaunty synth stabs along with these backing harmonies of a vocal snippet. Dan himself is singing very faintly, very quietly over this instrumental, Never Come Back. Once the drums kind of kick in, it starts to kind of get a groove going on. The song slowly builds and builds and builds. After 5 minutes, it's over and you're like, wow, that was a really good experience. Another song that was released as a single, Home, has more of a boom bap sound to it with the soul sample worked into it. It kind of reminds me of what Moby was doing in the 90s with albums like Play and 18. However, it doesn't feel like Dan is just ripping off this era of Moby that I don't really think a lot of people like to remember. It's a very fine track with a very soulful sample on it. Baby, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. We have 12 tracks on this album, 43 minutes of runtime, and I have to say this is one of his better albums in a while. It's dynamic, versatile, and it's catchy too. From a production angle of this album, there are various ideas sprawling back and forth. We have the song Like I Loved You, which is almost bordering on like a pop song in a weird way. Definitely not mainstream pop, but something on the lines of that. I can't quite tell exactly what any of the instrumentals are good for, but they're good for something. But the song in particular has some vocals that sound like Dan Snaith is spotlit on a stage, singing on a chair, maybe a bar stool, and just singing into the microphone. Kind of reminds me of someone. Sonny's Time reminds me of two different things. One, it reminds me of the fractured pianos on Tim Hecker's Virgins for some reason. I have no idea why. And it reminds me of rapping. You have these syllables repeating back and forth. They're almost chopped and screwed in a way where they're kind of bouncing off of one another, using each other to make some sort of rhyme scheme. It's a track that I very much enjoy, and I do wish it was panned out a little bit longer. However, I think this is definitely a highlight on this album. As well as New Jade, this is a song that includes a sample of something, a vocal sample, definitely, but the way it's repeated is so catchy and it's so engraved in your brain. Now, I do like many elements of this album, however, there are some moments on this album that I find lackluster, like the song Lime, which is not even that long. It does feel a little bit longer than it actually is. This instrumental is alright. It feels half-baked though, and it doesn't properly end either. The song Filtered Grand Piano is basically that. I don't really find any meaning of this song. It's kind of pointless. It doesn't really add anything new to the album. It doesn't really add anything interesting to this album like the rest of the songs do. And I think Cloud Song, as beautiful and gorgeous as this can be, it can go on a little too long. The other problem that arises with this album specifically is the flow of this album, running more like a compilation compared to his previous efforts. That is the problem when you have a versatile album like this. It's kind of hard to stay in consistent territory. I think the one thing that is consistent with this album is the production. Dan very much loves some piano. He includes some elements of trap, a little bit of those trap hi-hats on some songs, with a track like Sonny's Time or New JADE, and there are some very beautiful moments in the latter half of this album. I am very much enjoying this album, but I did want more from Dan. There are ideas that I feel like could have been fleshed out a little bit longer, fleshed out a little bit better, and what we have on this album is essentially 12 tracks of interesting material, but about half of those are fully fleshed out. The others include some very beautiful ideas, very interesting ideas. Others include lackluster ideas that I think should have been thrown away. I do wish this album was more consistent, and the songwriting on this album is good too. I kind of wish Dan himself was a little more vocally there. I think his delivery, very quiet, very subtle, can get a little tedious at points, but either way, this is still a recommendable album. Check this out if you like Indietronica with an electronic twist, with some deep house here and there. It's a very funky, groovy album that has its moments. The last thing I'll point out is that this album cover really much represents what this album has to offer. Mellow, calm, and soothing house music with, again, Indietronica and electronic elements to it. Yeah, it's a good album. I'll give it that. A very strong B, and yeah, that's really it. I am curious to know, what are your thoughts and opinions on this album down below? Let me know what albums you want me to review next. That is it. Leave a like, comment, share. Do whatever you want. Let me know how I can improve future videos down below. Remember,